everyone, thank you so much for deciding to click on this video to take the time out of your day to listen to Natascha's story. Before I get into it, I wanted to mention that she did write a book called 3096 Days. That's where most of the information in this video comes from. And if you guys want to check it out, I'm going to leave the link in the description. I highly recommend it. It will give you a lot of more insight than this video will. So without further ado, let's get into the case of Natascha Kampusch. Natascha was born on February 17, 1988 to parents Brigitta Cerny and Ludwig Koch. I apologize in advance if I am mispronouncing anybody's name. I know I'm going to do that at least 5 more times in this video. So before I go into who Natascha was as a person or her childhood, I wanted to go a little bit into depth of her mother's life because I feel like that gives a lot of more insight as to why her mom acts the way she does, which in turn reflects on Natascha and is why Natascha is who she is. So Natascha's mom got married and divorced at a very young age. At the age of 18 or 19, she was already a single mom to 2 kids. So being a single mom of 2 kids mean that she had to work very hard in order to support her family and had to sacrifice a lot of things that young adults do, such as partying and drinking and hanging out with friends and having time for herself. But she somehow managed, and eventually her kids grew up and out of the house. She actually ended up finding herself a new man. His name was Ludwig, and they weren't planning on having any kids. They had already been together for a couple years when eventually Brigitta fell pregnant with Natascha. Now Natascha was always loved growing up, but she always felt that she wasn't part of her parents' life goals. On top of this, her parents both had different ways of raising her, which only made things even more confusing. Her dad was very affectionate, he loved to play with her, he loved to show his love in physical ways, whereas her mom wasn't as affectionate, but she would always make things for Natascha. Her mom was a big sewer, so she would always sew her gowns and accessories and dolls. She also showed her love in teaching her valuable life lessons and teaching her how to be safe. But when Natascha was very young, her parents ended up getting a divorce and she spent about half of her time with her mom and half of her time with her dad. So let's catch up to a week before Natascha's disappearance. A week before, she was in Hungary on a vacation with her dad. He was renovating a house. He had been working on it for years, and this week was the week that he finished everything. Despite her loving being around her dad, she didn't really enjoy going on these trips because she was always very bored. He was busy working. He also was a big drinker. He hung out with friends, so she didn't have anybody or anything to really play with. Her dad was busy and there was no young kids around. So on the last day of their trip, the dad was supposed to drop Natascha off at her mom's house at 7 p.m. That was the mom's rules. She knew that the dad didn't care too much about safety as she did, so she didn't really trust him being out with her so late. But that day, he spent the day like a normal day, went home, took his time packing up, and even took a nap before dropping her off because he didn't really respect the rules that her mom had. So Natascha ended up being late about an hour and a half and arrived at her mom's house at 8:30 p.m. Natascha's dad, though, didn't drop her off exactly in front of her house. He dropped her off to where she had to walk through the courtyard in order to walk home, and when she got home she found that her mom wasn't there, so she went to go sit with a neighbor. Her mom went to the movies, and when she got back, she was furious to say the least. So when Natascha got inside with her mom took all the anger out that was supposed to be directed at her dad on Natascha. Since he wasn't there to receive all of this, she put everything on her, which she did do often, which really upset Natascha. Natascha's mom went off about her being outside late, her walking through the courtyard, her being home late, which it wasn't Natascha's fault. She was only 10 years old at this time. Regardless, at the end of this conversation, Natascha's mom told Natascha that she wasn't allowed to see her dad, which really was upsetting for Natascha. She needed her dad just as much as she needed her mom, and she needed her mom just as much as she needed her dad. Her dad was there to show her love and to play with her and to spend time with her, whereas her mom was there to set rules and to teach Natascha how to be responsible. So if she had just her mom, she had no outlet to be herself. She always felt restricted with her mom, but if she was always with her dad, she never had really any rules or any ordinance in her house, which both of them were equally as important to her, especially at such a young age. Somehow Natascha, despite her mom being incredibly angry that night, convinced her mom to let her walk from home to school. So the next morning, Natascha got ready for school and was still very upset at her mom, so she didn't say goodbye, even though her mom always told her, no matter how angry you are at somebody, always tell them that you love them, because you don't know if that's the last time you're going to see them. Natascha wanted to rebel and wanted to upset her mom, so she left the house without saying goodbye, without saying she loved her, or without giving a kiss, and she walked out the door and was headed to school. Natascha's mom watched as Natascha left the house and was feeling very hurt because she didn't get a proper goodbye. She watched Natascha walk through the courtyard, past some shopping centers, and eventually she turned a corner. After Natascha turned the corner, she saw a little further up a man standing next to his white van parked, and she was a little worried about this, but decided that she wanted to go against her mom, because her mom would always tell her to walk the other way if you see somebody who's suspicious. So of course she wanted to rebel against her mom and kept walking that direction. And the closer she got to this man, the more she realized that he was also approaching her. And before she knew it, she was thrown into the back seat of his van and they sped off. Later that day, after school let out, her mom was watching through the window to see Natascha return home. And after 10 minutes, she was worried but decided this is her first day walking home from school. Maybe she got lost. But after a half hour passed, Natascha's mom decided to call the school to see if she even left. And when she called, she was horrified to hear that Natascha hadn't even made it to school that day. So authorities arrived on the scene immediately, and at first they figured that it was her first day walking to school. Maybe she just got lost, because it was a pretty far distance from her house to the school. But all of that changed when they received a tip from a 12-year-old girl saying that she saw a man push Natascha into the back of his white van. So police ended up interviewing 776 white van owners, one of which belonging to a man named Wolfgang Pricklepil. Pricklepil told police that the morning of the kidnapping he was at home, and the reason why he had rubble in the back of his van was because he was doing construction on his house and was using his car to transport the rubble. Police bought the story and didn't even bother to do DNA testing, even after receiving a tip from one of his neighbors saying that they should look into this man because he is suspicious. But the reason why they didn't look into this any further was because the house, I believe, was under Pricklepil's mom's name, so it really didn't even belong to him. He was just living there, so that went nowhere. After Natascha was thrown into this van, she saw Pricklepil punching a bunch of numbers into his phone, trying to make calls, but he didn't reach anybody. She noticed that with time, he was getting more angry, and he was telling her things like, "They need to come pick you up. I can't be stuck with you. They need to come get you." She looked out the window and saw familiar places such as her grandma's house and her mom's job and shopping centers, which made her feel a sense of familiarity, but she knew that she couldn't access these places even if she wanted to, because she just got kidnapped by this man. Eventually, Pricklepil stopped in what I believe was a forest, and when he tried to reach people a few more times on his phone and didn't get anywhere, he sped off to his house, which was in a lower area of Austria, about a half an hour away from Vienna. Because of the trip that Natascha took to Hungary with her father a few days before, she had her passport on her at the time of her disappearance. Theories came up of organ theft and child pornography and sex trafficking, so they ended up taking their searches abroad, which led them to a French serial killer named Michael Fourniret. When Pricklepil and Natascha got back to his house, he had a cell already made for her. And let's just talk about this cell, y'all. It only had 54 square feet of space. It had no windows. It was soundproof. It was underneath his garage, concealed behind a cupboard, and the door was made of concrete and reinforced with steel. So it was very, very hard for him to enter this cell that he kept her in, but he did go there a few times a day to check up on her, to give her food, see if she needed anything, and to read her bedtime stories, which is very weird. So the first 6 months of her captivity, Natascha was never allowed to leave the cell. Prickly Pill would come down a few times a day to see if she needed anything and to give her some food. But as time went on, Prickly Pill granted Natascha some more privileges, which you typically see with captors. They end up giving their victims a little bit more freedom slowly with time because they still think that they're 100% in control and that they're doing this out of the kindness of their heart. During this first 6 months though, it was very hard for Natascha and Prickly Pill to keep in contact. No matter how hard Natascha would bang on the walls or would scream, he would never hear her. So he ended up installing an intercom system. And the second problem was that the room had no windows, so it was constantly dark, which really scared Natascha because she was only 10 years old at the time. So eventually Prickly Pill bought lights, but this also became a problem because they would never turn off and it was very hard for her to fall asleep. She ended up getting so sleep deprived that she started to hallucinate. Anyway, after the first 6 months, Prickly Pill finally let Natascha up to his house. But when it was nighttime or when Prickly Pill had to go to work, he sent her back down to the chamber. But she wasn't allowed up into the house without a bag over her head, and he even made her shave her head once because he was so worried about any of her DNA being left in his house. After some more time, Prickly Pill gave Natascha even more privileges, one of which was the ability to go outside into the garden. So at this time, so many years had passed that Natascha didn't look like herself anymore, so he wasn't too worried about people noticing her. One of Prickly Pill's business partners actually visited the house to borrow one of his trailers, and he saw Natascha there and said that she looked relaxed and happy. So according to Natascha, every morning he would wake up early with her and they would go upstairs and eat breakfast together. Most of her time was spent upstairs doing the housework, keeping up the house, and cooking for Prickly Pill. One way that Prickly Pill would try to control her was by telling her he was always carrying a gun, so if she tried to run or tried to alert anybody, he would shoot them and the neighbors. Another thing he did was tell her that the doors and the windows were booby-trapped with high explosives. After a few years, Prickly Pill bought Natascha books in order to keep herself educated and also gave her access to radio, TV, and newspapers. She ended up teaching herself a few skills during this 8 years, one of which is being how to knit. According to Natascha, her and Prickly Pill would wake up early and eat breakfast together. Another way that Prickly Pill tried to keep Natascha in control was to beat her so badly that she could barely walk. In her book, she mentioned that Prickly Pill would beat her at least 200 times a week. Eventually, on her 18th birthday, Prickly Pill granted her another privilege, which was the ability to leave the house with him. He actually ended up taking Natascha on a skiing trip in a resort near Vienna for a few hours, which really strange, but she didn't look the same as she did when she went missing, and everybody was looking for a 10-year-old Natascha, not for this grown woman. She ended up denying going on this trip though for a few years because she was afraid of the backlash that she might get. Because a lot of the times when the media hears that somebody had an opportunity to run and they didn't take it, they tell them, oh, well, you should have ran then, or you should have told somebody you had the opportunity to. But keep in mind, you don't know what's going through somebody's mind unless you've been in that situation before. Prickly Pill was very manipulative, and she believed that Prickly Pill would kill her and the people around her if she were to tell anybody or if she were to run. So Prickly Pill pretty much had everything under control, at least he thought. On August 23rd, 2006, at 12:53 p.m., he lost control. She was vacuuming his car in the garden when he got a phone call. Since the noise of the vacuum was very loud, he decided to step inside to take the call, and this is where Natascha saw the perfect opportunity to run. She left the vacuum on and bolted for about 200 meters. She ran through streets and jumped fences and was yelling at passerbyers to call the police, but of course everybody thought that she was crazy and didn't do anything about it. She eventually stopped at a 71-year-old's house, knocked on the window, and told her that she was Natascha Kampusch, and the woman called the police. Police arrived at 1:04 p.m. and took Natascha into a police station to get questioned, and was identified through a scar on her body, through DNA testing, and because her passport was still in Prickly Pill's chamber in his house. When Prickle Pill ended the call and went back outside and saw that Natascha was gone, he ran to the nearest train station and jumped in front of it and committed suicide. Prickle Pill always told Natascha that police would never find him alive. So this was something that he was planning to do one way or another at some point. When Natascha heard that Prickle Pill had jumped in front of the train, she reportedly cried and cried for a very long time. So many speculated that she was dealing with Stockholm Syndrome. If you don't know what Stockholm Syndrome is, that's when a hostage develops an emotional connection with their captors, and it's typically considered irrational because it's just a coping mechanism for being in danger. So because Prickle Pill starved Natascha, she was severely underweight. At the time of her disappearance at 10 years old, she weighed 99 pounds, and 8 years later, at age 18, she only weighed 106 pounds, y'all. She only gained 7 pounds in the entire 8 years that she was held captive. They did evidence recovery, which was very difficult because he had a pretty old computer. It was a 1980 computer. I'm not sure what computer it was exactly. But what they were able to find from his computer was that Prickle Pill was trying to fake paperwork as a Czech citizen so he could start a new life with Natascha. So today, Natascha is 32 years old, and in 2010, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, she wrote a book called 3096 Days, which was the amount of days that she was held captive by Prickle Pill, and in 2013, that was turned into a movie. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to Natascha's story, and if you have any other cases you would like to see me cover, definitely leave it in the comments below. Thank you again, and have a very nice day.